Thank you so much, Steve. Admiral Solomon and Admiral Taylor as well, who I understand will be acting as the gatekeepers for this evening. First of all, let me just say good evening, and it is so great to be back among the PHS family. It's hard to realize that it's been over a dozen years since I retired. The Corps has continued to evolve. Many of my former colleagues who were junior officers at that time have risen in the ranks, some of you even to flag rank, and some of you have even retired as well. But some elements still remain as evergreen statements. And one of those is the core value of the Commission Corps. And that's what I'd like to discuss with you this evening, spending a few minutes describing these core values, my interpretation of them, and then having a fireside chat with you on this topic, as well as topics of your own interest. For my part, as I mentioned, I'd like to discuss briefly the origin of the core values, what they are, how to use and apply them in the PHS and after. How did we get here? Well, in early 2000, there was a real concerted effort to revitalize the Corps. Under Surgeon General Carmona, who, as we all know, was a former Army Special Forces medic and who appreciated the latent capabilities of the Commission Corps, he led the way by directing and supporting the development of standards, physical standards, the Basic Officer Training Corps, which is now the BOTA, the Basic Officer Training Academy, and on and on. This was accomplished through the establishment and empowerment of working groups of officers from all ranks and from all agencies. Issues and strategies were analyzed top down, bottom up, 360 degrees. And in 2005, we released the core values of the Commission Corps. We are, we always will be experts in health warriors, pursuing health for the people of our nation, individuals within communities, and communities comprised of individuals. I went looking through my old collection, and I'm pretty certain that many of you recognize this coin. Many of you may have earned this coin, but I'm not so sure how recently you've looked at the coin on both the front as well as the back. Because on the back of this coin are the 4 core values. I'd like to refresh your memories about these values because each of us, exercises these core values every day in our professional as well as our personal lives. Leading leadership, providing vision and purpose in public health through inspiration, dedication, and loyalty. Service demonstrates a commitment to public health through compassionate actions and stewardship of time, resources, and talents. Integrity exemplifies uncompromising ethical conduct and maintains the highest standards of responsibility and accountability. And excellence exhibits superior performance and continuous improvement in knowledge and expertise. Now, I was not supposed to be the only person on this program. Captain Paul Jung, who was supposed to be my partner for this presentation, is unable to be here because he is on deployment. He had intended to take these four core values and apply them to his deployment activities? Well, he is living them as we speak, just as each and every one of you does every day. And while these values have been carefully defined, they're very open to personal interpretation and personal execution. Let me share with you some of my perspectives. Leadership. Leadership is not given or granted by merely occupying a position or a role, but rather must be continuously earned and manifested. At the previous session, my good friend and colleague, Rear Admiral, now Dean, Boris Lushniak, spent time describing and defining leadership through his lens. And as I looked through the thumbnails, I think I saw your thumbnail up there, Boris. I'm glad to see you here. And there are many styles of leadership from my perspective. We can be servant leaders. We can lead with humility and a command presence. And as each of us is a leader in public health and in our profession. Service. Service is to others, but service must also include service to self. You have heard the term selfless service, and that must be balanced with caring for oneself as well. Because if we do not, if we falter physically or mentally, we will not be able to serve effectively. Integrity is a sine qua non of what we stand for as officers, as leaders, and as individuals. Integrity is the coinage of what we do and gives us the credibility to do what we do. Speaking science to power. How much have we seen the need to maintain this over the last few years? And excellence, a clear driving force in all of our professional lives, but a pragmatic caution, not to let perfect get in the way of good enough, not to delay critical decisions while waiting for the 99th degree of certainty, when perhaps 80% gives us sufficient direction. So how can we use and apply these core values in our professional and our personal lives, both in the core and after? Because there is life in the core and there is life after the core. I can tell you that from my perspective and in my experience, having these 4 core values while I was in uniform prepared me for life after the uniform. Whatever you do, wherever you are, whatever you decide to do once you retire. And as Admiral Solomon mentioned, yeah, I failed 2 retirements. I'm looking for my 3rd retirement. But at the same time, applying these 4 core values to everything that we do, that I have done, has stood me in very, very good stead. That's basically what I wanted to do to introduce this topic of the core values of the Commission Corps. And I'll tell you that when we discussed the topic of this session, I went back and Googled the core values of the Commission Corps, and you can as well. There's 1 pager in it that gives the entire history of how we achieved arriving at these 4 values. So let me stop right now and let me invite a dialogue with you in this fireside chat. I hope that we'll have some really outstanding dialogue. I've seen thumbnails. Victoria Babb is on. Actually, she is not. John Babb is on Victoria's account. I've seen Pat Villion. I've seen Robin Hunter Buskey. I've seen Mike Milner and so many others whom I have dealt with and served with for so many years. I'm glad to see you here, and I would welcome your dialogue. Let me turn this back to Admiral Solomon and Admiral Taylor.
Thank you very much, Admiral Moritsugu. I really appreciate your thoughts and opening remarks as we engage in some discussion this evening. I did just a few moments ago place in the chat a request for questions, whether on this topic of the core values or really anything that you wish to discuss here. Admiral Moritsugu has been gracious to really be an open book and to discuss anything on the minds of our officers, active duty or retired. So let's open it up. And since you called on Victoria Babb, who looks worse for the wear there, Admiral Babb, let's call on you first if we can, sir, and open it up. Looks like you're still muted.
Now,
yes, sir.
Admiral, I know that from firsthand experience that one great thing that a leader can do is to give people an opportunity to succeed. Sometimes seeing things in junior officers and younger officers that they don't see in themselves, and putting them in harm's way, more or less, in order to grow. And I've seen you do that time and time again. You've certainly done it for me. I'm forever in your debt. I wish we could go back to one of your statements earlier about science overcoming bad information. I wish we could solve that as a Corps. I'd appreciate hearing your advice, your recommendations to our officers and to our retirees about how we might address that. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, John. And by the way, here's a plug for your new book. You have pivoted from being a pharmacist into a published author, and I think your second book is coming out very shortly.
Well, actually, the fourth one. And
excuse me, I haven't read the other two.
This one is all about the Commission Corps, if you will, dealing with all kinds of public health emergencies. So
great.
Thanks for the advertisements.
Well, your question about how best to speak science to power, I think we've got a great example in a former Assistant Surgeon General, and that is Tony Fauci. I think he is the epitome in my mind of how one can maintain one's integrity as well as continue to speak science to power and maintain that focus on science and evidence. I don't think I have to go any further into explaining what I'm describing, because I think all of us have seen his performance, his forceful way of making certain that the best science and evidence was available to the American people. The fact that he was gagged, the fact that he was sidelined, unfortunately, is a matter of public record. But in terms of what he was able to accomplish by sustaining the value of science in the face of power, is something that I will always admire. Thank you very much, John, for that question.
Great, thank you. We had a question in the chat from Admiral Lushniak. Comparing core values of other services, what makes us stand out?
That is an interesting but very deep question, Boris. I think that the other services really focus on service before self, on selfless service, but they are focused on cores, on organizations that really are military in their basic philosophy. I think that our four core values really focus us on our public health responsibilities, as well as our professional and personal responsibilities. I used the term health warriors. I remember we were using that term several years ago in terms of defining the U.S. Public Health Service. And I think that that really is what defines us as the science-based warriors to protect and defend the people of the United States. Unlike the other services who maintain the same kind of commitment to protect and defend, but they are protecting and defending through military means. Thanks, Boris, and I'd love to see more of you.
Thank you, sir, for that response. Another question from a retired Captain Alan Echt. What would you say to a young person considering joining the Commission Corps?
My goodness. I go back to a dialogue that I've had with our late Surgeon General C. Everett Koop, that he said, you know, if we did not have a public health service, we would have to create one. And especially over the last few years, where Boris, thank you very much for your leadership during Ebola, and the leadership that the U.S. Public Health Service has taken in COVID-19, that we can have a massive impact on the health and the safety and the happiness and the security of our nation by joining the U.S. Public Health Service. We are a group of professionals who interact with professionals, protecting individuals in communities and protecting communities who are made up of individuals. It reminds me of a decision that I was faced with very early in my career. I was an internist by training and felt very comfortable in treating patients one at a time. And then I looked at the individual in the context of the community and decided that preventive medicine and training in public health would expand my impact from one at a time to communities at a time. And I think that the Public Health Service has opportunities across the entire spectrum of capabilities, whether they are individual, whether they are communities, whether it's in research, in academics, in education, anything is available to a public health service officer. And that would be my spiel in trying to recruit someone into the public health service as a junior officer.
Great, thank you. That's great counsel and great insight. Recognizing that we do have the 4 core values that you've mentioned and addressed this evening, is there any, were there any other values that were considered and ultimately not selected that you can speak to?
I would suggest that these 4 core values do represent the key elements of what we felt in terms of focusing the attention of the officers and outside individuals as well, reviewing what we defined as core values. These core values were derived from a process by which we started with throwing all kinds of concepts on a whiteboard, collapsing them, condensing them, and analyzing them to make sure that as we wound up with these 4 elements, that they would represent and encompass as many of the other elements as possible. So I would suggest that we did not jettison anything, but rather we consolidated them, and that's how we wound up with these 4.
Fantastic, thank you. Let me turn to my colleague, Admiral Solomon, to get the next question. I think we have a hand up from Admiral Milner.
Admiral Milner, sir, would you like to you have a comment or a question, sir?
Yes, hi, Steve, good to see you. Good to see everyone. Dr. Moritsugu, thank you for presenting this evening. I listened to what you were saying, and I recall the blending of 2 of those of our core values, leadership and service, and what you mentioned about mentorship and feeling like you got to be pushed out of your comfort zone. I remember being in Phoenix, Arizona at the Indian Medical Center for 13 years, very comfortable, thinking I might just park my long taproot there like a saguaro cactus, and getting a phone call from you suggesting that there may be opportunities farther east. And I'm curious, I just wanted to share that from a personal experience, but I often hear you use this phrase, and I'm not, let me put it this way, I'm often guilty of not following this guidance, but I try to remember it all the time and I try to think about it. And I'm curious to hear you expound on it more. And that is the notion that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Thoughts about that, sir?
Well, that goes back to a concept known as health literacy. It's something that when I was on active duty and even after, I very much am embracing the concept of health literacy as a fundamental tool in achieving health and achieving public health. Well, what's health literacy anyway? We as the professional experts oftentimes are communicating to others what we think is the correct way or the best way to do things. However, the way we communicate oftentimes leaves a lot to be desired. Health literacy is communicating in such a way that the person that we're trying to communicate with hears the message, understands the message, embraces the message, and ultimately puts that message into action. Because anything short of that last step we've wasted all the rest of our energy, because really what we're trying to do is to encourage people to put that best information into action. Now, when you hear the term health literacy, you may think, oh, dumb patient, you don't understand. The point is that oftentimes it's not the dumb patient who doesn't understand. It's sometimes those of us who are attempting to communicate, who communicate in our own language, as opposed to communicating in the language of the person we're trying to communicate with. So when you hear the term health literacy, don't think dumb patient. Think also, how can I rephrase what I'm saying? Not speak in medical jargon, not speak in doctorese with another doctor or doctorese with a patient, but rather finding that common way of doing things, speaking in commonese. That was a sort of a pivot off of Mike's specific question, because one of the additional points that I'm often guilty of making is, oftentimes we are so professional, we think we know a lot, and we do know a lot. And we're very eager to let people know what we know. A pastor of mine once said in a sermon, the good Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. And when you do that, you'd be surprised how much knowledge and awareness you can hear and garner that will inform how and what you speak. Oftentimes when you're dealing with individuals, whether it's in administration or it's in a clinical setting, individuals are reticent to really say what they really mean. But using that concept, listen twice as much as you speak, you'd be surprised how much more insight you can gain. Thanks for that point, Mike.
I'll follow up. We have a great point from Captain Hunter Buskey, who's shared with us on the chat that it's always been true that our officers, especially younger officers, are sent out, but it's never been as true as it has been, I think, in the last 12 to 15 months with so many deployments. And folks, our young officers go out, whether they're on their own or they're in a team, they're all leaders. They're all being called on, often in very difficult circumstances. How can they use the core values to fall back on those in those moments, those difficult moments, when they're first called on to lead in a difficult circumstance?
Robin, you're always one to throw me a real ringer. But I think that it really comes down to an issue of being a servant leader, as I've used that term, and also leading with humility. Being put in uncomfortable circumstances can be a challenge, and it oftentimes is a challenge. Whether or not it is a physical challenge, a mental challenge, or an organizational challenge. I will say that in my career, I have faced those kinds of issues myself, both in the Corps and after the Corps. The key there is to not to lose sight of the opportunity that kind of a difficult situation puts you in, to learn and to try out different solutions that will help inform your behavior after you are out of that situation. It would be a real disaster not to take advantage of that opportunity. And unfortunately, some people just simply think, oh, poor is me, I'm never going to be able to do this, and both physically as well as mentally go south. That, in my opinion, is not the right way of doing things, but rather trying to extract the kernel of opportunity to learn through experience or through knowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to do something a little risky here and call on Mehran, Captain Masudi. I see that you put a question in the chat. Let me have you ask that live, if you're able.
Great. Can you hear me?
You bet. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, thanks. It's great to see you, Admiral Moritsugu, and many others. So I was wondering if you could maybe share with us a little bit of wisdom in that we oftentimes, as we respond to disasters, we're seen as those folks responding to that particular disaster, and it may be huge, but how best can we work to bring recognition to the regular work, the routine work that prepares us the most for those particular deployments? And that is our routine job, which at most times gets less focus. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Iran. That's an interesting question, because I would have imagined you would have asked the question in the other direction. And that is that you are receiving recognition for your day-to-day work, and you never get recognition for being deployed and for public health disasters. And herein, I believe that it really is a case of communication. It's visibility and communication. Number one, be visible by being in uniform, by not necessarily being in uniform as contradistinct from your colleagues who are in civilian clothes, but rather being present and being visible. That's number one, so that you don't become an invisible resource to the day-to-day operations. That's number one. Number two, then following up with the 4 core values in terms of providing leadership. When you may be a follower in a follower position, but again, finding the opportunities to express points of leadership to those who are your superiors. In addition to that, using the area of service, looking to do things that are not necessarily only in your own job description, but finding ways to expand and to show your commitment to an organization and an organization's mission, to find additional ways to suggest improvements, to suggest better ways of doing things in your day-to-day activities. That really is throwing me a little bit for a loop, because, as I said, I would have imagined the question would be, how can we be best acknowledged for being deployed? And I think that in the second instance, I think that the hierarchy has recognized the value of the Corps as being our health shock troops if that's a way to express it. I envy the Corps, because you now have 2 presidential unit citations. We never saw anything of that sort in my 37 years. So I would suggest that people are noticing what the Corps does and how the Corps does it in our deployments, and looking backwards into your normal daily activities. As I said, apply those 4 core values, and I think that you can very well be recognized.
Great, thank you, Mehran, and thank you, sir, for the response. Next, we'll call on Admiral Sven Rodenbeck.
Hey, Sven, how are you?
I am pretty good, sir. And you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm a little pivot, but also would like, it feeds into the topic, but it's a little of a pivot. Wonder if you could comment on how our 11 categories are different, but how we don't want our officers to be in silos. And sometimes it's difficult for our young officers to bridge across these silos that sometimes are artificial.
It is a perfect question, Sven, because I can fall back into my metaphor of a career-long effort to collect dots, to nurture dots, because you never know when you will need to connect dots. Everybody whom you meet is a dot. And if you maintain your collection of dots only in your silo, you're limiting yourself, you're limiting your expansion, you're limiting your visibility to within that silo. You're also limiting your effectiveness, because increasingly so, I believe, there is an effort to cross-fertilize activities. In diabetes, for example, a physician who is an endocrinologist needs to be able soon to be able to talk with a hepatologist because of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is very frequent in people with diabetes. At the same time, an endocrinologist would necessarily talk with a diabetes educator who can be a physician assistant, a nurse, or one of a number of additional professions. As we look at President Biden's initiative for infrastructure improvement, you look at that, and infrastructure is not only engineering, it's also mental health, it's family health, it's a number of issues, all of which are coming together. And I can recall very, very quickly, if you'll humor me, with one example of how collecting dots, nurturing dots, because you never know when you will need to connect dots, came in handy for me. Back, everyone knows what happened on 9/11, but very few people know what happened on 10/16. 10/16 was the day that the intern opened the envelope of anthrax on Capitol Hill. And as you can imagine, all hell broke loose. Well, I was the Deputy Surgeon General at that point, and I was taken to Congress by then Secretary Tommy Thompson, who said, as our level of commitment, as our symbol of commitment to helping, we're going to leave the Deputy Surgeon General here, and he'll be in residence to assist. We quickly found that we exceeded our laboratory capabilities to test for anthrax. And NIH was saturated, our commercial laboratories were saturated, and I was left thinking, how can we test? Well, one of the dots that I had collected over the years was General John Parker with the US Army, and he was the commander of Fort Detrick. Well, guess what? I called up John, I need your help. Ken, what can I do for you? I need laboratories. It's yours. And that is an example that I carry with me all the time about how collecting dots, nurturing dots, connecting dots when you least expect it. And that's where, as you say, not stay in your own silo, but reach outwards and reach outwards. Thank you, Sven.
Thank you, Admiral. We have, I think we're going to take one last comment. Among the very distinguished people that are here with us tonight is Dr. Pat DeLeon, who does not remember the fact that he helped me more years ago than I care to remember when he helped Senator Inouye shepherd through a program that was teetering on the edge. But more importantly, and thank you for joining us, Dr. DeLeon, but I believe you have something that you can share with us.
Thank you. Ken, you've always been a very big person on families, being sure you take care of your own family yourself. Perhaps it's your Hawaii background, or, you know, we talked about growing up with your grandparents. Perhaps it's Chaminade. Why don't you share with the group your daughter's most recent success?
Well, thank you very much for giving me that opportunity. And you will notice that my whole body swells out of pride. My daughter, Erica Moritsugu, has just assumed a role as the assistant to the Deputy Chief of Staff to President Biden. She is also the designated administration point of contact for Asian Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian affairs. And she has an office in the West Wing and is enjoying herself and giving me all kinds of opportunities to tout that she is no longer Ken's daughter. I am Erica's dad.
Bravo.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, sir. And certainly we can see how you're radiating with pride for your daughter's work, and certainly she will do great things in that role there in the White House. Thank you for sharing that. And
Thank you.
congratulations to you, sir. We want to thank you so much for taking time to join our membership this evening and share some insights on the core values and just some great life lessons as well, as you've entertained the different questions that have been arisen. We do want to, as we close, we want to turn some time over to our executive director, Jackie Rychnovsky, for some final comments. But before I do that, just since we have the membership online, just to make everyone aware, next Friday, the COA membership renewals will be sent out. So please keep an eye out for those. We really appreciate those who are members and who continue to be members of the association. We cannot do what we do without the membership. So thank you. If you happen to associate with another active duty officer or another retired officer, I would invite you to ask them if they are a member of COA. And if they aren't, please invite them to do so. So with that, let's turn the time to Captain Ruknovsky.
Thank you, Admiral Taylor. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. As I said, this is our 5th COA gathering. We have made a concerted effort to provide you all some replacements for the annual meeting. We're very, very excited to start the planning for our 2022 meeting. It's going to be in Phoenix in May. I want to invite you to take a quick look at 2 things on our website, PHS COF. I'm going to share 2 screens with you. If you haven't yet checked out the category day events that are all going to be virtual this year, I invite you to do so. You will see for each of the 11 categories the dates and some links. Please register. There is no charge. These are open to both COA members and non-members. And the other thing I want to share with you hot off the press, this can also be found at the phscof.org website, is our new USPHS Scientific and Training Symposium abstract book. We decided never let a good abstract go to waste. And even though we had to cancel our 2020 symposium and postpone our 2021 symposium, it doesn't mean that there wasn't great value in these abstracts. And so you will see that this is a 53-page, beautifully done PDF document. And I'm just going to scroll down quickly to show you that you will be able to read each and every abstract that was submitted and accepted and cleared by the OSG and the OASH in 2020. So please take some time to look at those 2 things. We're going to put that information in the chat. And that concludes our event tonight. I invite you in June to attend our COA all-member meeting. We're going to post that, and you'll see that in Frontline in May. And then I'm very excited to announce that our July guest will be our new Surgeon General. And so please be on the lookout for that. And we hope to see you in both June and July at our continued events. So have a great evening. Thank you so much to our guest speaker, Admiral Moritsugu, Admiral Solomon, and Admiral Taylor. And we will see you all in June. Have a great night.